in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our monthly Strengthening Families Networking webinar. I'm Kaylin O'Connor from the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and I'm excited about our topic today, which is about an unlikely partnership focusing on the Parenting Sentencing Alternative Program in Washington State. And that name is the title of a film that was released today as well, a very short film. So we hope you will all watch that. Some of you may have seen it already today. But it'll be part of what we're talking about today, the program itself and the film about it. So we will follow this agenda today. I'll give some updates from the Center for the Study of Social Policy. Then we'll hear about the Parenting Sentencing Alternative Program. Then Nilofer Hassan and Jean Swift are here to talk about the Building Community Building Hope series. And then we will send you off to YouTube to watch the film An Unlikely Partnership if you haven't done so already. So I will start with some updates from CSSP. Just to make sure everyone knows, we do these networking webinars each month, usually on the second Thursday. We're a little ahead of schedule this month because of some schedule conflicts, but we worked it out. So we do this the second Thursday of each month. This is jointly convened between my organization, CSSP, and the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds, who are longtime partners of ours in helping states and programs to implement the Protective Factors Framework. We have a different topic each month with guest speakers, and we coordinate that a few months out in advance. So if you would ever have a topic you'd like to share, please let us know. We're always looking for interesting angles and ways that people are using the Protective Factors Framework that others might learn from, and always welcome suggestions from the field. The recordings and materials from all of these webinars are posted at the site you can see there. That link is always in the follow-up email that you get after the webinar as well, so you can go there and see not just today's webinar and the materials associated with it, but also the webinars from the past many years. It goes on for pages. You can keep scrolling through and find topics that you were maybe interested in that you missed at the time they were offered. It is a treasure trove. So our upcoming webinars, on May 11th, we're going to hear from our friends in Idaho, Maureen Durning and Jane Zink, who actually have a book coming out about teaching the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework. So this book includes materials that you can use in your own trainings, regardless of which curriculum you're using. It might give you some ideas for activities or different ways to approach a specific topic related to protective factors. I'm very excited about it. I think you will be too. So I encourage you to participate in that webinar in May. And I'm actually putting the registration link in the chat box, although it's coming out looking funny, but I'll try anyway. Oh, good. It looks all right. So you can use that to register for the webinar in May. Otherwise, those are always announced in our Strengthening Families e-update newsletter that goes out towards the end of the month. So keep an eye out for that and get registered as it comes. And then mark your calendars for the second Thursday of the month in June and in July, and stay tuned to find out what the topic is. Okay. So a couple webinar tips. If you are ever having trouble hearing, I recommend you switch between phone and computer if that's an option. If you're calling in by phone, you want to enter your audio PIN. That's how the system connects who you are on screen with who you are on the phone line. That allows me to unmute you if you want to speak at some point. So you can always raise your hand if you do have a question and you'd like to weigh in on the conversation. You can also type into the question box, and we will read those questions aloud so that the presenters can answer them. Just a couple other updates from CSSP. There's a podcast that came out from the Children's Bureau focusing on the protective factors. You can see the link there of where you can find this. And I will just point out the listen box at the top, or button, is a bit confusing since the web page is about a podcast. That listen button will result in a computerized voice reading you the page, which is very useful for accessibility for the website, but not so useful if you're trying to listen to the podcast. So you have to scroll down and click on where it says Protective Factors Part 1. That's an interview with myself and Tabitha Kelly from Arlington County Human Services. You may have heard Tabitha present on a webinar last fall about how they're using the protective factors throughout their child welfare and behavioral health services. And the part 2 will focus more on what Arlington County is doing. The first part is sort of an intro to what protective factors are all about, primarily from a child welfare perspective, but as we all know, it's all relevant to any type of service we're providing to families, and we do talk about the other ways that the protective factors framework is being used in communities. So I'd encourage you to listen to that if you like to listen to podcasts, or recommend it to others who might want an overview or refresher on the protective factors. Another announcement from CSSP, we are giving for the second time an Accelerating Change Award, and encourage you to nominate innovative initiatives that reach diverse populations of young women and girls of color. And this is particularly focused, or the recipients in the past have been particularly focused on girls and young women of color who are engaged in public systems, so child welfare, juvenile justice. But I'm not sure it's completely limited to that. We encourage you to go to the website, that's cssp.org/Accelerating Change Award, and check it out if your program or a program you know serves that population. We would love to hear about it. And then the group of programs that receive the award will become part of a learning community to learn from each other and figure out how to tackle some of these challenges together that come up as you run this kind of program. So I encourage you to think about who you might know that would benefit from that, or if your program would be eligible, please consider applying. So with that, I want to get us into our topic for today. I will take a moment to say another word about the video, because you may have seen one of the reminder emails that went out said that we were going to watch the film during the webinar, and that turned out not to be technologically possible. So instead, you got the link in your email earlier today with the reminder to participate in the webinar today. So some of you may already have watched the film. I hope you do watch it. It's fantastic. But we shifted things around a little today because GoToWebinar was just not quite ready to make our dreams a reality in terms of showing the film on the webinar today, and we didn't want to end up with some technological glitches during the webinar. So we're going to jump right into talking about the program itself, and then encourage you to watch the film if you haven't already. So with that, I want to welcome our presenters from Washington State today. Jenny Olmsted is in the Department of Early Learning. She's a longtime partner of ours in Strengthening Families work. And Susie Level is from the Department of Corrections, and they have formed a really innovative partnership there. So Jenny and Susie, can I hand it over to you?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kaylin. I'm going to let Susie go ahead and intro the parenting sentencing alternative. So this is the piece that sits at Department of Corrections, and then in a few slides we will talk a little bit more about the partnership.
Hello everybody, hope everything's going well today. So my name is Susie, and I am the administrator with the Department of Corrections for the Parenting Sentencing Alternative. And what that is that's an alternative to incarceration that the legislature created in June of 2010. It became effective and allows offenders who have minor age children to either be diverted from prison or to transfer out of prison and complete their sentence on electronic monitoring. So on this slide, the Parenting Sentencing Alternative law actually created two alternatives that are quite separate. And we refer to the court-side alternative as the FOSA, or the Family and Offender Sentencing Alternative, and that's a judicial option that affords a judge the opportunity to order the Department of Corrections to complete a risk assessment, whereby we, the defendant, would sign releases of information allowing us to gain information about child welfare history. So the law requires Children's Administration, our Department of Social Health and Services here in this state, to do a child welfare history check, so that those releases of information include any involvement with CPS or Child Protective Services, with behavioral health and recovery where they might have had mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment. And it offers the opportunity for the judge to consider that within the risk assessment to determine whether or not it's an appropriate alternative at that time. If the judge considers that it is, he or she waives a prison sentence regardless of the amount of months that someone would spend in prison and imposes 12 months community custody. The other alternative is the community parenting alternative, and it's a prison-based alternative. So those offenders who are already incarcerated, who are parents of minor-age children, who meet a criteria, are eligible for consideration. So even though there's a law that indicates a criteria, we look a little bit deeper than that in terms of really trying to determine suitability, because one of the things that was really important to us as an agency, and certainly when I got the position and looking at how to formulate or what are we doing with this alternative, was one, we wanted to make sure that we in no way created harm for children. And two, that we made sure that we were making the right choices and it was not a get-out-of-jail-free card. So the structure of the program and the opportunity that we had to move people either out or to divert people from prison became a real focus of importance around needs. So,
so we can go to the next slide, Kaylin. The one that we'll be focusing on during the conversation today is the Community Parenting Alternative, CPA, which is also the one that the video highlights as well. So we'll just go into a little bit more detail around the requirements of that.
Yeah, so as Jenny said, the film focused primarily on the prison-based portion, and that's the crux of a lot of the partnership that that we've developed with Early Learning and Children's Administration, Department of Health, and some other entities. But specifically to the inmate program, these are some of the things that are in the law that an offender must meet the criteria for. So either that they have physical or legal custody of a minor child, doesn't necessarily have to be their own, a proven, established, ongoing, and substantial relationship with his or her child that existed prior to the commission of the offense, or is a legal guardian of a child who is under the age of 18 at the time of the offense. And then that's where that release of information comes in. It's actually in the law that they must sign the release, and that they understand, we inform them that that is active for the term of their supervision. They can't have a current conviction for a felony that is sex or violent or be subject to a deportation order. And the Department of Corrections is directed to determine that such placement is in the best interest of the child, and that we also consider, in our policy, we made the decision that we do take into consideration nature of harm of the offense, the visitation schedule, again, understanding that sometimes distance is a barrier, so it's not a rule in or out situation. It's just one of those opportunities to be able to show or reinforce the criteria around, especially that proven, ongoing, and established relationship, infractions, and overall behavior while incarcerated. The requirements for the courtside alternative are similar. There's a couple differences, but it's very similar as well. So with the requirement in law that we as an adult Department of Corrections agency had to make a determination around best interest, I knew that that wasn't our level of expertise. So it was really important that we extended an invitation and established relationships with those in our community or other state agencies that addressed or worked with children. So early on in the very beginning, when we started, because it became effective June 10th of 2010. We hired our staff by the end of June, and we were at a retreat and trying to decide what are we going to do. So, you know, I got that sort of gift of being able to meld that social work practice and core correctional practice, and that's where it became really, really clear that we needed to have partners at the table to help us make some decisions and to understand the other side of the equation of safety. We're pretty good at measuring risk of offenders, but we're not so good at understanding in totality what risk is presented with kids. So to that end, there was agreement with our partners initially, Children's Administration and the Department of Early Learning. Actually, I sort of fell into that by accident, but it's certainly a fortuitous accident, where I went to a meeting with a colleague. I was a bit of a tag-along and got to meet Judy as well as Shannon and some of the other staff at Early Learning and really start talking about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and almost saying, gee, I sure wish I could use your help and have some level of expertise. And so the conversation just started going, and before, you know, it was easy to understand and know the expertise that lied here and being able to have them at the table. So we developed this multidisciplinary screening committee that includes Children's Administration divisions of DSHS, so Children's Administration, Economic Services, Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery, and Juvenile Rehabilitation, as well as Early Learning, Department of Health, the Department of Commerce. They have the Washington State Victim Advocate, Domestic Violence Victim Advocacy staff. We also have from DOC our Family Services Unit staff, our Victim Liaison staff, as well as a Community Corrections Officer, the Program Manager, and myself make up this committee. And the primary focus of this committee, the job that we're there to do, is to really assess and weigh the risks, and in the end make that determination: is it in the best interest to move this offender out of prison home on electronic monitoring in order to be with his or her children. So the kinds of things that we look at, and it was a bit of an evolving partnership and process, you know, initially really kind of talking about, honestly, understanding terms and language, because in children's, or maybe even early learning, when you're thinking about or looking at situations or family dynamics where domestic violence might be part of that dynamic, the word escape has a positive connotation, but for us in the Department of Corrections, that word tends to create a lot of angst and create a lot of anxiety for us. And so even simple little things like that, being able to speak a similar language, being able to understand what each other is meaning in each of those situations and scenarios became really, really important. And that's why initially and early on with my program manager, we made that decision that we would have similar language, that we would adopt some of the practices that are working well in children, such as the strength-based approach, the solution-based case management model, when we would work with our offenders and their families. We got cross-training opportunity. There was opportunity to sit and talk about what we thought it was going to look like and get some input and feedback for that. So in that assessment, that screening process includes the following things that you can see on the slide. Just to point out a couple things. One is that transfer plan. What that means is that each offender that goes through the process fills out a packet of information where they set some goals and they identify barriers or supports that they might have in their transition. They also talk about things that they want to see for themselves or their children on a 1, 3, or 5-year period. And then we also in that packet, people provide oftentimes letters of support. We might have letters from employers of offenders while they've been incarcerated, from community members, sometimes church groups or previous employers from the community. Also included in there sometimes are pictures of the families that are supplied. And also in this transfer plan, it's a culmination of an interview with the offender around certain elements. So the housing environment, where they're living, where they're going. We do investigations of homes. We do ask the adults who reside in the home to fill out records checks so that we can understand the dynamics of the household. Any infractions, visitation, education, employment, programming, or anything the offender might have participated in is included in that plan. And so it's used as an opportunity to create a picture or tell a story in order for us to make an informed decision. In terms of the family dynamics and talking about that, you know, those are the great things that the partners bring to us, and the training and the opportunities for my staff, just being able to understand the differences and understanding what we really need to know about family dynamics in order to work effectively. Because one of the things, you know, we want to be able to do is to help people learn those skills and abilities to sustain good, positive, and promote healthy structure in family and relationships. And so in order to do that, trying to build on those strengths, it was important for us to understand. And honestly, you know, Department of Corrections has a pretty good history of being able to tell people what they need and what they need to do. It was really a reversal of opportunity for us to be able to take in and listen and spend more time and opportunity in utilizing those skills around motivational interviewing and helping people really focus on children. And so the primary focus is around being able to be a present parent, which means that they're clean and sober first and learning those skills and abilities to prioritize their kids. And through this process and this multidisciplinary screening committee, I think is what I would certainly sort of tout as a best practice in being able to bring systems together in a way that we haven't done in this state, but to be able to share information for the betterment of children and families. So Jane, I don't know if you want to.
I think Susie captured it really well. I did just want to add that the committee meets the second Thursday of every month. So this is a monthly committee. And all of the experts are in the same room at once, reviewing the same packets for the parents and going through and creating a plan for release if there is agreement that the parent should be released early. So it really is a thoughtful process where all the partners are at the table discussing what's in the best interest of the child and the supports that can be wrapped around for the parents. It's a really great process with a lot of different pieces of information being shared, depending on the expertise that's in the room. That really lends itself to building, I think, a powerful relationship between the community corrections officer and the parent, so that they both know what they're working towards. And then also if other people need to be pulled into the picture, such as a social worker, or if we need to be pulled in for any sort of Head Start pieces, then we can do that piece as well.
You know, one of the things that's been really enlightening for me through this process, because our first committee meeting was September of 2010, so we're, you know, almost coming into our 7th year, is sort of that opportunity to be able to look at things from a different lens. And, you know, it's really easy, I think, with offenders specifically to see things on paper and think, oh my gosh, you know, this is really high risk, this person, you know, really isn't ready. And being able to gauge motivation of people for change is, I'm sure everybody on the phone can sort of smile a little bit, is a difficult task. And being able to try to find that opportunity at that right moment for that right opportunity for that change. But I think it's easy to be stuck in your own view of what things look like, and it's been hugely rewarding and educational for me to be able to understand a whole other side of the equation that maybe we didn't think about. And the Department of Corrections, being an adult agency, has not really, I think, seen families as assets to the degree that we now understand that they can be, and the opportunities to be able to support kids in situations where it has nothing to do with themselves in terms of it wasn't their fault, they didn't have a responsibility in it, yet they suffer the consequences in a lot of ways of their parents' unlawful behavior. And so being able to help kids understand that their path doesn't have to be the same, or to have those opportunities to help parents be supportive with their kids has been really great. And through this process and understanding those different points of view that Department of Health brings, that Division of Behavioral Health brings, that the Juvenile Rehabilitation brings, the Early Learning brings, those other community partners that we've had at the table historically, such as child psychologists. We also had groups, nonprofit groups that worked with offenders in transition. So to really be able to hear those perspectives and all those contributing factors to either a successful reentry or where people tend to stumble and fall.
So this is Jenny. We were going to dive in a little bit deeper on the partnership piece with early learning and corrections, just to give folks on the phone an idea of how this partnership really works together and the focus around the protective factors that really is the foundation of those screening committees that we just mentioned. So as Susie mentioned, this partnership started in 2010. I started on the panel in 2013 when I started in this role, and it's been a huge learning curve for me, I think, because working with parents that are incarcerated hasn't been part of my background. So for me, it's been really neat to be able to see and understand parents that are incarcerated in a different way, in a more deep way, and then how their children tie into their life, which is really nice. So as we mentioned earlier, we attend those committee meetings the second Thursday of every month. We have another colleague here at Department of Early Learning that also attends, so we make sure one of us are there or both of us every single time. And I feel the lens that we bring is the protective factors piece. So for us, it's really important to be thinking about what's going right in the family's life all the time. So keeping that front and center of the conversations. As you can imagine, some of these parents have history that has a lot of trauma as part of it. And so sometimes people can kind of get stuck in the weeds of going through that. And so I feel like we really bring the lens of thinking about, yes, that has happened, and what's still going right for the family. What are those social connections the parents have in their life? What are the visitation pieces that are happening between the parent and the child still that we can focus on So I feel like that's kind of what we do, and in addition to that, we also help train the staff that Susie works with. So those community correction officers, we do training for them about once a year on the protective factors framework to ensure that when they're going to the homes and having those visits with the parents, that they're really focusing on those protective factors in how they're working with the parents. So they may not use that language, as we know, but definitely ensuring that they're building those into the plan with the parent.
You know, I think that's something that has been challenging for staff. You know, these positions, again, this is a brand new sort of way for the departments to work differently with offenders, and I think, you know, sometimes there are barriers in that, and sometimes, you know, people see the benefit immediately. You know, I think there was a struggle in some of our institutions around referrals initially, thinking that, one, first of all, it was only for mothers, which it is for both fathers and mothers. And the dads have had some great success on this alternative, and, you know, really kudos to those guys for stepping up and doing the right thing when it comes to their kids. But even internally, you know, staff having feelings of we don't really have any business dealing with children, where we deal with adults, this is kind of where we are. So being able to educate our staff as well, I think, has been a really good opportunity to see where those kinds of changes can occur, where we start to see success with our offenders in the community on supervision or in transition out of an institution. So I think the partnership lends itself for us to be able to see areas where we can strengthen with families and be able to support families while people are incarcerated.
I also wanted to mention, as you can see, this partnership has also lended itself to other partnerships that have happened within DOC and also outside of DOC. So our work with incarcerated parents has grown actually more statewide in addition to just this piece. So I feel like that has been a wonderful byproduct of this partnership, is that our influence has now expanded within early learning and correction. So it's broadened, which is wonderful for our state. And I think the next slide will dive into some statistics and outcomes of the CPA program, and it also has some FOSA information as well.
Yeah, so these outcomes are as of January 5th, 2017. You can kind of see the total participants and broken down by each alternative. Actually, for the percentage of offenders returning to prison on a new felony, although it says June of 2016, it was still consistent for the end of the year. We didn't really find ourselves increasing as an overall, except but 1%. So the percentages were actually changed. I believe it was a 7, a 9, and an 8. So it came out combined to be about 8%, where we see a return to prison. And although I can't necessarily compare it to the overall recidivism rate in the state, because the numbers, as you can see, are not quite high enough to be able to make a comparison. But I can tell you that in our state, in a 3-year period for recidivism, the way the state measures that is a return to prison on a new felony after completion of either supervision or a prison sentence. So the state average in a 3-year period is about 34%, and we're experiencing now a combined 8% return to prison rate in a 6-year period. And the thing I find, one of the things that was really interesting, and I find actually really astonishing, and I can't explain, wish I could figure out the cause, but for the dads in our program, we had 5.5 years go by before the first dad actually entered prison, the first dad who had successfully completed the alternative went back to prison on a new felony. And so that's really, really phenomenal. The dads have done really, really well on this alternative. They've adhered quite well to the structure. As you can see, most of the people who begin the alternative are successfully completing that. The breakdown between men and women is roughly about 68% women, 32% men, somewhere around that. Whereas initially when we started, I think it was about 85-15% split. So we have had an increase of dads participating on the alternative. I think that the opportunities, the outcomes initially are really, really promising about how to work with a high-risk population and being able to impact their lives in a different way, in a positive way, in a way that has, I think, direct incentive and benefit to the completion of something or to the adherence of a system or a protocol. We know that, you know, the people that we work with, offenders in general, have really low coping skills, and so being able to have an opportunity to be able to say, here, we're going to give you what you want right here on the front end. You're going to get to be with your kids, and in return for that, we want to be able to build a sustainability plan. We want to be able to build an opportunity that focuses around the needs of your kids. So structure and routine are really, really important. Making sure that you try and have dinner time at the same time every day. Have a bedtime routine. Making sure that everybody's reading with their kids for a minimum of 20 minutes a day and or engaging in homework. If you have kids that are older or in high school, you know, having those conversations about next steps in college or vocational training or skill-based training. The other thing is having dinner time without distraction of TV or other electronics, you know, building that family focus in family in these settings where that has not always been the focus. A lot of, and I think Jenny would agree with this, a lot of the people that we review in committee have generations of issues, whether it is substance abuse or whether it is parental incarceration or whether it is involvement in the system. We know that about 85% of the population that we've had on our alternative also receives services from other state agencies, such as Children's Administration, or maybe even early learning on home visiting programs, or maybe even some level of financial assistance or some other previous involvement with CPS. So again, I think there were a lot of signs and opportunities that just pointed us in this direction of collaboration that makes so much sense for this population.
So the next slide talks a little bit about the benefits. We wanted to share some photos of some parents that have successfully completed the program, and the gentleman at the top with the thumbs up is actually one that will be in the video that you all will be watching, and this was the day he actually received full custody of his child. So just wanted to share some, and that's her as well on the bottom right-hand side. So just wanted to share some photos so you all can see the outcome and then go over some of the benefits that this program offers to families. As Susie mentioned earlier on, the primary focus is really present parenting, and I feel this program really offers an opportunity for parents to do that as it provides some therapy pieces, and employment is not part of the structure in the first 3 months. So it really is just getting acclimated with being a parent again, particularly if you've been away from your child for a long period of time, really understanding where that child is, learning how to co-parent with maybe who was previously caring for the child. So this program is really built in a way to give space for that, which I think is amazing.
Thank you, Jenny. That was nice. I just want to highlight that picture up in the top. Those players in that picture, of course, our participant in the middle there with the thumbs up, the CCO there on the right, and then the CASA worker and the social worker, I think, are the other two people. This was a big deal, I think, for us, certainly to be able to realize and see someone's hard work coming to that point of having that reunification. And I just, you know, certainly want to give props to this guy. He's done really, really well. He's even giving back in terms of offering opportunities for other people who've been on the alternative, other dads, for employment and support while in the community. He's just been, it's just been a real joy to watch him grow. And he is somebody that I used to supervise when I was in the field in the early 90s. So I know that there's great benefit for him. The other picture on the bottom left is a guy who just completed a couple weeks ago and got to take his family to Disneyland for spring break. So that was really exciting to see too. So in terms of the benefits around that solution-based case management, it's a different approach for the agency. Usually corrections agencies are deficit-driven. We really tried to flip that upside down, try to operate from a strengths approach, and being able to realize and asking and getting involved with offenders and families much differently than we have historically. The structure of the alternative, really understanding and realizing that people leaving from prison need to be able to somehow assimilate a level of structure or routine when they transition, and which is oftentimes very difficult. It's a night and day experience for most people. If you can just imagine for a moment being in a in a facility where you're told where to go, what to do, how to do all those things on a 24/7 basis. You have two choices of commissary in terms of what level of shampoo, for example, that you might want to use for, say, 3 or 4 years. You come out, imagine that first trip to the grocery store and you're standing in that aisle with all the shampoo. I mean, how overwhelming that really is. And so I think it takes a real toll of that. So structure is hugely important in transition. And then, of course, the opportunity with family management or family dynamics and inclusion. So really working closely with the offender and the family, that present parenting model that Jenny and I talked about earlier, and that kid focus. So focused around development, nutrition, education, physical, mental health, and really being able to incorporate that strengthening families and those protective factors in a way that gives us all this other work to be able to do. So I think it's just been a huge, huge benefit for us. What a gift for this partnership. So.
And the last slide contains our contact information. So feel free, we realize there may be questions, so feel free to contact us anytime. And I believe there will be some time at the end of the webinar as well for some Q&A, so we will be sticking around and happy to answer any questions that may come up. Thank you, Kaylin.
Thank you both so much. We do have one quick question, more of a clarifying question that we might as well answer right now. So Christina Toth wrote in how many counties and or prisons is this program available, or is it statewide?
It is statewide, so all 39 counties in the state of Washington, and any offender incarcerated in any prison is eligible. Those that are sentenced and sent to jail, not to prison, would not be eligible for the alternative. So they have to be facing a prison sentence in order to be eligible.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I will just encourage everyone in the audience, if you had other questions, feel free to type them in the next few minutes while we're hearing from Nilofer and Jean, and we can loop back to answer those questions as well as any you have for Nilofer and Jean. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our partners from the Child Abuse and Neglect Technical Assistance and Strategic Dissemination Center, or CANTASD. Nilofer and Jean, are you there?
Great. Thank you so much, Kaylin. And I just, again, we're so excited to be on this webinar. We're so excited and inspired by the work that is going on in Washington State. I know that you told people at the beginning of the webinar, and I know Jean's going to talk in a second about how the work that they've been doing is something that we've been highlighting in one of our Community Building Hope film series, and we all hope that folks will go see it, and Jean's going to tell you more. We want to underline also the fact that this population is so important. There are 5 million children in our country who are impacted by parental incarceration. They either have a parent in prison or they have a parent who was at one point in prison. The numbers are really hard to get, but we know that 15 to 20% of kids in the child welfare system have a parent who either is or was incarcerated. And we know that 7% of kids in our country are impacted by this issue. So, and that, the loss of a parent is always hard for a child, but the loss of a parent to incarceration, with the addition of stigma, with the addition of just the many, as Susie was talking about, the sometimes complicated sort of histories of these families, just mean that they're very, very vulnerable and that they need support. This is why we're, again, so excited about the work that's going on in Washington State, both as a model for a different way of work with these families. And I think, Kaylin, to you and CSSP as a testament to how a strengths-based approach using the protective factors can have impact with families often dealing with very complex issues. So we just want to give a little bit of context so that folks know that there are other resources around this issue, and to encourage folks who are working to support these families to come to CANTASD as a resource place for tools and tips and resources to support your work. So CANTASD, we are a strategic dissemination platform. We are funded by the Children's Bureau. We work with a bunch of federal partners who care about child abuse and neglect. We work with a bunch of national partners like CSSP, like the National Alliance of Children's Trust and Prevention Funds, who are deeply committed to the prevention of child abuse and neglect. And our goal, we know that there's so much good work going on in the field, and our goal is to make sure that that work is accessible to those on the ground. We work in something called innovation streams, and families impacted by incarceration is one of the innovation streams that we'll be pursuing over the next year. So that means that, coming soon, you can go to our website and you will find a landing page with lots of great resources from our federal and national partners that will support your work with families, that will support changes in your programs and practices, that will just support your ability to learn more about this population and what their needs are. So, as I said, coming soon, not quite up yet, but go to our website in the next month and you should be seeing some of those things. We also are doing we just finished a digital dialogue where we were working with the San Francisco Children of Incarcerated Parents Project about their work with families impacted by incarceration. But these are very short opportunities to engage with a national expert around an issue area. We will be soon publishing what we learned from the audience based on our conversation in that digital dialogue. And then, of course, there is our film that Unlikely Partnerships that focuses on the work that you heard about today. So we'll tell you more about that. Kaylin, are you going to move the slide or should I? Thank you so much. We also wanted to take this moment to tell you about another campaign that we are doing during Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month. So for those of you who are really working to build public awareness around child abuse and neglect, we just launched a set of social media messages called We Can, Work to End Child Abuse and Neglect. And what We Can does is it takes, we tried to marry a beautiful image, a short message that was relatable, that was sort of that folks on the ground, whether parents or workers, could connect to, and that clicks to a deeper resource for folks that want to learn more. So we have, I think, 46 of these messages that we will be publishing on our social media platforms over the course of the month. If you go to our site several times during the day, you should see a new message. So go to our site often. You'll see multiple messages. We really encourage people to share them with the field, to push them out there. We want to get the word out to as many people as possible that child abuse and neglect is something that is not, that is something that we can all contribute to connecting with families and supporting families in a way that can impact the issue. So come to our site. I want to highlight two particular messages for folks who are particularly interested in families impacted by incarceration. On April 5th, we ran a message that promoted Unlikely Partnerships and has a still from the movie. So for folks who want to get the word out about the work that's happening in Washington State, we encourage you to go to our Facebook site and to share that message from April 5th. You'll recognize, if you see the film, you'll recognize that it's a still from the film. Also on April 18th, we will be sharing a message that just takes a still from these really excellent Sesame Street resources that are targeted to the children of incarcerated parents and really help children, provide tools and handholds to talk with children about their feelings about their parents' incarceration. So we really recommend you to share that one as well if you care about these issues. And then Kaylin, if you move the slide again, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Jean Swift, who is going to talk about our Building Community, Building Hope film series.
Thank you, Nilofer. Well, you can't have missed it by now that Jenny and Susie's program featured in the film An Unlikely Partnership is one of the series of terrific films produced by Kent Hesby on behalf of the Children's Bureau's Office on Child Abuse and Neglect, drawing on the talents of terrific filmmakers at the Department of Expansion. The films, each one features an innovative partnership, and the films are designed to engage communities and leverage partners at the local level around what actions they might do or folks might do to support children and families. The films are available at the CANTESD website. You can actually download a hard copy of the film to play at community events of your own. There are some resources available, but we are also in the process of developing more robust resources to accompany the films, and also film-specific resources to facilitate their use in local communities around important issues. So again, as Nilofer said, I encourage you to visit the website, join us on Facebook to stay up to date on the resources that are coming out, the films that are coming out. We actually have a 5th film that we expect will be out this summer called Dad's Rock, that talks about father engagement. So please keep in touch.
All right, thank you so much, Nilofer and Jean. I'm going to go ahead and move us to our questions slide. I'm also going to put the, I'm going to put the link to the film into the chat box so people have that if you want to start finding it. We had one question written in, which was about whether similar programs are happening in other states. And I think I'll open that first to Susie and Jenny in case you're aware of any others. And then I think Nilofer may have more to say about that, and I can chime in as well. So Jenny,
Yeah.
Susie?
So yeah, I'm aware Oregon passed a pilot law last year and targeted 5 counties for a courtside alternative, and they mirrored it pretty much with what we've been doing. I've been going down there probably up to the 3 years previous to their passing of that, working with them on coming up with information and structure and kind of how to do some of that. They were not, however, interested in the prison-based alternative. I have had calls from many states across the nation. I'm not aware of any other law that is like ours where we have those 2 types of alternatives, one pre-sentence and one post. But I know that there's been quite a bit of interest in that. California had a law on their books called an Adult Alternative Custody Program, I think, ACP, where they were transitioning moms, but actually had received a call from them 3 months after we started saying, how did you do that? So I don't think that they had hit the initial numbers that they thought they would, and I'm just not sure where they are now. I've sort of lost track of that. I know that there were some men in that state that sued, saying it was unconstitutional that only women got to participate, and I think they won. So I'm not sure if they're having to reconsider what they're doing. But in terms of on a statewide basis, as we've done it, I am not familiar with any others than what I've mentioned.
And from my perspective, the only additional site I know of is in New York, and I don't think that it is statewide. And I feel like I could provide only a tiny thumbnail of information at this point, but if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to provide more information.
Thank you both. The other thing I would add is that while it's not a sentencing alternative program, we do know that folks in Idaho, their Department of Corrections has embraced the Strengthening Families Protective Factors as a way to do what was previously parent education before parents were released. Now for parents who are on probation and parole, they have a really intensive class that goes through the protective factors, and it's very interesting. We've had Jane and Maureen present about that on previous webinars, and we can get you more information about that if you're interested. The state of Vermont was also using protective factors in their Department of Corrections, but I'm not sure in what way. And again, it wasn't through legislation like we see in Washington State that really was changing people's sentences, but more with how the Department of Corrections was relating to the parents while they were there.
And Kaylin, can I break in for a second?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the other things that we want to emphasize is there are multiple points and multiple ways programmatically that people can engage to better support families impacted by incarceration. So, you know, it can feel something like a sentencing alternative can feel overwhelming if you're just a family resource center or, working at a programmatic level. And we want to stress that there are multiple ways to engage around this issue. And as we go through the year and we are putting out more things in the innovation stream, we will be one of the things we want to make sure is that we're providing that range of options for how you can connect to these families, engage in support from wherever you are, whether you're a social worker, whether you're working at the policy level, whether you are working at the community level.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple other comments coming in. Patricia Allard wrote in, California fathers won. So you were right, Susie. There was a lawsuit, and it did come out in favor of the fathers. We also have a comment from Jenny Fitzpatrick, who says, I just wanted to say that I think this is an amazing program. I've had the pleasure of being on the committee almost since its inception. The braiding of the different agencies and the services has really helped provide some wraparound opportunities for these families. Thanks, Jenny, for sharing that perspective. And I think it really is remarkable what you've been able to do there. Now, related question we have from Jordan says, how was this program brought into the design? Who advocated for it, and how is it funded? So I think Susie told a little bit of that origin story of how you ended up connecting with the Department of Early Learning and building that multidisciplinary team. But I don't think we really addressed the funding side of it. So does this funding all come through corrections, or how else does that work?
Yeah, so of course, from 2007 on, I think, most of the states in our country had issues around budgetary obligations and money that was coming in and revenue. And so in our state, our corrections department took some pretty big hits in subsequent years or sequential years. And so part of what our agency did in 2007, 2008 was start to ask staff around, hey, can you give us some ideas where you think that we can save some money without compromising any safety as we look at supervision or confinement time and some of the other aspects that we do. And so this came out of that process as a prison reduction idea, saying, hey, if we can transfer nonviolent or offenders who are parents in order to be with their kids, we can do a couple things. One is we can interrupt that, hopefully have an opportunity to interrupt that intergenerational incarceration issues. We can work with other state agencies to reduce duplicative services, thereby saving costs on an overall basis, and being able to sort of work differently and being able to reduce prison costs. Honestly, when you look at on average, it's about $90 a day here to incarcerate somebody. On the electronic monitoring, it's $7 a day. Then you have to factor in a couple other kinds of things, but we're probably, certainly saving per day per offender a minimum of, $30 to $50 if you subtract like the cost of supervision and some of those other things to that dollar amount that I provided. So, really the whole idea and the structure was around a cost-saving measure, and then it grew into what we see today. And there was wisdom of leadership in our agency where we partnered with DSHS, Department of Social Health Services, really early on to be able to make sure that we were making sense of the kinds of things we were proposing and wanting to do. And it had, honestly, full support going through the legislature, so that was really nice.
Thank you so much, Susie. That's a really good answer. I hope that answered your question, Jordan. So those are all the questions we received, and we are going to wrap up a little bit early so that if you had this time blocked off for the webinar, you may still be able to squeeze in the film. It's just over 9 minutes long, and you can go to this link, which is also in the chat box. You can't click on it on the slide. And this profiles some of the families that have participated in the program, shows what those meetings are like, where the multidisciplinary team is deciding whether parents are relevant. Sorry, not relevant, eligible for the program. And I do see one more question came in, which is, can we get copies of the enabling legislation they used? So that question's coming from Jim McKay. I think a lot of people would probably be interested in that, so perhaps we can post that with the webinar materials on the Google site. And so Susie and Jenny, if you can get that to me, we'll get that posted. So with those questions answered, I think we will send you off to watch the film. And please let us know if you've got questions or if you want to get in touch with anyone, please do. Thanks, as always, for participating, and I hope that you enjoy the film as much as we all did, and get inspired to share it in your community and get some conversations going about how we can better support those children and families that are quite vulnerable. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and hope to see you again next month. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.